All right, hello everybody, and welcome back. We're going to be talking about Chapter 5 in our textbook today, which is Describing Distributions. Hopefully you've already listened to my lecture describing the topics in this chapter: central tendency, so mean, median, and mode; variability, which would be range, variance, and standard deviation; as well as talking about skewness and kurtosis. So we talked about what all those mean in that previous lecture, and now we are going to learn how to run these statistics on SPSS, so please be sure you have your SPSS program and your book with you. And the first thing we need to do is enter the data. This is on page 66 of your textbook. Again, this data is based on the cartoon on page 65, which has something to do with zombies, which is nothing I know much about, but nonetheless, we are going to use their data. And so we have to name our 4 variables, and they have them named deep thoughts, and the label is deep thoughts per day. How many deep thoughts zombies have per day. The next one is brain thoughts, and this is the number of thoughts about brains that zombies have per day. The next one is empathy, zombies, and this is how many thoughts they have about empathy for zombies per day. And lastly, empathy humans. And this is how many thoughts they have empathy for humans per day. Okay, that we did in our variable view. We named the variables, we labeled them. In your data view, you're going to enter the same data you have here on page 66. So the first line is 1, 2, 0, and 0. So if you would enter the data, there are 20 participants, 20 zombies, I guess they asked these questions of. So if you'd enter that data, go ahead and do that. And I have it magically entered here. So here is the data, and you do want to be sure when you enter data that you check it, that it's correct. It seems like such a small minor issue, but it's easy to make a quick little careless mistake, and then all of your analyses would be incorrect. Okay, so starting with measures of central tendency, mean, median, and mode. So this is when you're trying to figure out what is the average data for each particular variable. You can find this data a number of different ways, but you can definitely find it here when you do Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and we're going to go back to this Frequencies tab. So Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. At this point, you're going to move over all of your 4 variables, and you can either use the arrow or you can double click, however you want to move them over. But here are the 4 variables that we want to look at. Click on the Statistics tab here, and here are your measures of central tendency: mean, median, and mode. Okay, you could also click other things. There's sum here, there's skewness and kurtosis, there's variability, but for this moment we're just going to do mean, median, and mode. Click Continue, and then OK. I'm going to unclick Display the Frequency Tables. You could keep this checked, and then you would get your frequency distribution, but I'm going to unclick that since we don't need it right now. And then your output should come up over here. And here we go. We have our output table. Here are 4 variables: deep thoughts per day, thoughts about brains per day, empathy for zombies thoughts per day, empathy for humans thought per day. It gives us our N. We have 20 participants in each, for each variable. We have no missing data. Remember, if there was missing data, then there would be maybe 19 here and 1 here if someone didn't answer this particular question. And then these columns give you, so for deep thoughts per day, in this case, the mean is 6, the median is 6, and the mode is 6. Also, thoughts about brains per day, we have the same thing, a mean of 6, a median of 6, and a mode of 6. Now, if your mean, median, and mode are all the same, which they are for both of these variables, that means we have a normal distribution. The mean, median, and mode are all lined up, and we have a normal distribution. Here we've got empathy for zombies per day. Now here the mean is 6, the median is 7, and the mode is 8. So looking at this set of data, again, you would know the mean. If you add up all the scores and divide by 20, which is the number of scores, gives you an average of 6. The median here of 7 means that 50% of the scores are above 7, 50% of the scores are below 7, and the mode, meaning the most common number of thoughts per day in terms of empathy for zombies, is 8. In this case, this would be a negatively skewed distribution where most of our scores are high, 8 or above, and we probably have a few low scores that are in the, I'm going to clear this for us. Let me clear this. There we go. Yeah. Yes, I want a clean board. What we've got here, in terms of let me get this one more time. Yes, sorry about this. Is that we've got mostly high scores with a mode here of 8, right? And most of our scores are high with a few lower scores down here towards the negative direction, causing this to be a negatively skewed distribution. Okay, and then over here, empathy for humans thoughts per day, our mean number of thoughts per day is 3, median is 2, mode is 1, and again, we've got the mean would be adding up all the scores and dividing by 20. The median is the middle point. 50% of your scores were below 2, 50% were above 2, and the mode is 1, which is pretty low. So I guess zombies don't have a lot of empathy for humans in terms of their thoughts per day. And in this case, we have a positively skewed distribution, meaning that most of the scores are low, and we have a few scores would look the opposite of this. Most of our scores are low, with a mode of 1, but we must have a few scores that are higher, skewing this distribution to the positive side. And that's how you find central tendency, or one way at least, in SPSS. Now, in terms of measures of variability, so range, variance, and standard deviation, we're going to do that as well. You go back to your data set. I'm going to show you another place that you can get some of this information. I showed you could go to descriptives and frequencies, hit statistics, and here you go, standard deviation, variance, range, minimum, maximum. So you could get those variables analyzed that way. But you can also do it, analyze, descriptive statistics, and now go down one to this descriptives pull-out menu. When you are there, let me move these over. Your variables would be here, and you would need to move them over to this variable section by clicking them over. And now in this descriptives section, you would hit options, and here you go. I'm going to uncheck mean because at this point I'm just wanting my measures of variability. I want standard deviation, minimum, maximum. I want the variance, and I'll take the range as well. So here are those measures of dispersion. Click continue, click OK. And now here are your descriptive statistics. When you run descriptives, your variables are here on this left-hand column, and then you read across. So for deep thoughts per day, again, n equals 20. The minimum number of thoughts per day, deep thoughts per day, any zombie had was 1, maximum of 11. The range is 10, which is maximum minus the minimum, gives you a range of 10. And then your standard deviation, our typical measure of variability, and your variance. And remember, if you square root the variance, you'll get standard deviation. Thoughts about brains per day, again, we have 20. This one ranges from 2 to 10. So 10 minus 2 gives you a range of 8, and your standard deviation and variance. And same with empathy for zombies and empathy for humans. Again, it gives you your minimum, maximum, your range, and standard deviation and variance. Those were what we had selected. And you can see which variable had the least amount of variability. Well, that would be thoughts about brains per day, right? It only ranged from 2 to 10, giving us a range of 8. And you can see the standard deviation here is the smallest, suggesting this is the smallest amount of variability in this particular variable compared to the other 4. Lastly, measures of normality, skewness, and kurtosis. Again, you can find this analysis in a number of places in SPSS, and they're doing it through frequencies in your textbook. So I will show you in descriptive. So if you were there, you could get skewness and kurtosis. But you can also do it through the frequencies option. Clicking on statistics, I'll get rid of mean, median, and mode because we've already done that. And come over here to describing our distribution and click on skewness and kurtosis. Hit continue, hit OK. And now we've got our 4 variables, and we have measures of skewness, the measure of skewness. Now when skewness equals 0, that means there is no skew. It's a normal distribution. If your skewness is a positive number like it is here, empathy for humans in terms of thoughts per day, this means we've got a positively skewed distribution, that we have most of our values are low, and a few outliers on the very positive or high side, causing this to be a positively skewed distribution. And you can see here, empathy for zombies per day, this is a negative number. That's telling us that we have a negatively skewed distribution. That in fact, most of our data were very high, but we had a few outliers towards the low numbers, causing a negative skew. And again, you could go back to my lecture on this chapter, not the SPSS lecture, the regular lecture, to review skewness. But here are the measures that it gives you. And in that lecture, I also did tell you kind of how to interpret this in terms of how large this number needs to be considered a skewed distribution, or how small it has to be a not skewed distribution. So you can go back to that lecture to get that information. We're going to skip standard error of skewness. Don't worry about it. Kurtosis here is how peaked or how flat your distribution is. The closer to 0, again, the closer it is to a normal curve. And if you have positive numbers for kurtosis, in fact, these are positive, that means that we're talking about a distribution that is more peaked or leptokurtic than a typical normal curve. A negative number, like we have here for deep thoughts per day, there's a negative number for kurtosis. That means you've got a more flattened curve that is what we call platykurtic, flatter than typical. So again, if it's a 0, then you've got a normal curve. A higher number is going to represent a more peaked distribution, and a negative number is going to represent a flatter distribution. And typically, although this isn't in your book, I would typically probably go into frequency if I was analyzing all of this, hit my statistics, and get it all at once. I'd want mean, median, mode, my distribution statistics, standard deviation, variance, range, minimum, maximum, hit continue, hit OK, and there you go. You have everything right there. And that should make you pretty happy how quick you get that data if you remember taking your lecture class and how long it takes to calculate this all by hand, right? And so here you go. You've got all your data in one quick analysis. Here are your variables, and you can go through with the mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, skewness, kurtosis, range, etc. So you can get a lot of information really quickly, and truthfully, if you really wanted to, you could just get your frequency distributions and your histograms, hit continue OK, and then you get everything all at once. Here's your histograms. Oh my goodness, look at all this data. Here it was. Here's our frequency tables. Deep thoughts per day. Remember how a frequency table works? How many people how many zombies answered a score of 1 for deep thoughts per day? Only 1. How many answered they have 2 deep thoughts per day? 1. How many zombies said 7 deep thoughts per day? Well, that's 3. And this is the percent of the sample. What about thoughts about brains per day? Again, here's your frequency table. Empathy for zombies, empathy for humans. Here are all of your histograms. And then you also have all your statistics right above it. So you can see that very quickly you can have an analysis that gets you all of your descriptive statistics. All right, I hope that helped you figure out how to run all of the measures of central tendency, variability, skewness, and kurtosis. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and have a great week. Thanks.